Welcome, my rising, redeemed, relentless warriors. My name is Icarus, and this is the After the Fall show, the place where lives are shared, falls are felt, and rebirth is forged in fire. And today we're going to be talking about something that I'm really excited about personally to hear, because it's not just a story of survival and passion and power to help others. It's a life lived before that. And I think it's going to be almost an adventure at the front, a heartfelt piece in the middle, and a legacy carrying on into the day beyond today. So I'm really happy to have Terry with me. Hi, Terry. How are you doing?
I am great, Icarus. Thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to this.
Oh, thank you for coming. So listen, Terry, the way I do this, I tend to jump just straight in, because if I was someone listening, knowing the story that you have, I'd be banging on my own door saying, Icarus, stop speaking and let Terry take the mic. So can we jump to the beginning of your adventure? So I know that you almost got chapters upon chapters. So can you take me to the first? Who were you and what was the journey you went on until the point when things began to change?
Yeah, so I'm the oldest of three boys. I grew up on the south side of Chicago. You can't tell this from looking at me or from my voice, but I'm 6'8" tall. And I actually went to college at the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina, here in the US on a basketball scholarship. When I graduated from college, I'm really going to date myself now. I moved home to find a job because the internet wasn't available at that point. Fortunately, I found that first job in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain, in their marketing department. That was the good news. The bad news was I lived with my parents for the next 3.5 years as I helped my mom care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer. After Wendy's, I actually went to work for the hospital that cared for my father and my grandmother. I thought they did such a great job that I wanted to be part of that. And then at 37, made the major pivot in my life and became a police officer. And part of what I did during that was I was a SWAT hostage negotiator. After that, started a school security consulting business, coached girls high school basketball when we lived in Texas. But for the last 14 years now, I've been battling a rare form of cancer, a rare form of melanoma. And then I guess just finally, my wife and I have been married for 32 years. We have one child, a daughter, who's a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy and is an officer in the new branch of the military here in the U.S., the Space Force.
That's amazing. As soon as you hear the word Space Force and anything, that in itself deserves a round of applause. These people are changing the world, but it sounds like your journey has changed the world too. And if you look back to what I hear there, first of all, Wendy's, great burger chain, by the way. My wife is a fan. The second part is that going to that piece where you get near to sort of basketball and coaching, you're impacting people's lives directly. And I can only imagine the honor in one way, but also pressure of a SWAT negotiator. I mean, what was that like in your?
People always ask me, why did you do that? I was 37 years old when I became a police officer, but by the time I got into SWAT, I was in my 40s. But Icarus, I've always in my life wanted to be part of the best. And in SWAT is usually the best officers with the best training and the best equipment. And it was amazing. I loved it. It was very high stakes, very high stress, but I worked with great people. I had great training, and it was a matter of helping people who were probably having the worst day of their life. I mean, if you're talking to me and your house is surrounded by the police, you're probably not having a very good day. So it was just something that I got a lot out of, and I hope I gave as much to the people who were in crisis as I got out of it.
Yeah. I mean, a day in the office is having someone's life in your hand indirectly, isn't it? And that's both the person who is a hostage, but also the person who may be in crisis. Because I think people automatically probably think that someone doing something like that is automatically a bad person. But I guess at times it's a person who also needs help.
A lot of times it was a person just who needed help, and we would get there and many times have no idea why we were there, what precipitated this, what brought this on. And, it wasn't an authoritative kind of thing. We didn't start out with, I'm Officer Tucker, I'm Sergeant Tucker, or anything like that. It was, I'm Terry. What's your name? And a lot of times it'd be like, you don't need to know my name. Okay, what do you want me to call you? Call me Bob. Okay, fine. Bob, help me to understand why we're here or what's going on. Again, the important word there is understand. If I was negotiating with somebody that had just killed 3 people, I wasn't going to say I agreed with you, but understanding leads to trust. And trust leads to hopefully getting to a point where that person will come out safely. That's really what we were trying to do, get people out safely. And we did that in a lot of ways. And I'll just give this to your audience, just some to chew on. We would use how and what questions. We would stay away from why questions. Because when we were all growing up, you did something stupid as a kid, and mom and dad would be like, why did you do that? So why questions sound accusatory. It would be like, Icarus, why did you wear that shirt today? Oh, wait a minute. Does Terry not like the shirt I'm wearing? I can get to the same answer by saying, Icarus, what made you decide to wear that shirt today? It's just a softer question. It lands differently, but it gets the same information that I'm looking for.
Even that from a piece of learning for people listening, that's powerful knowledge to know when you talk to yourself, isn't it? Because I think we sometimes put ourselves under pressure. But if we just say, I look awful in this, we can say, how can I look better? Or how could I feel better? So tone and angle is really important. If you look at that time, I know you said there that you had sort of people in hospital and then you ended up working there as well. How did you find that exposure? Because I guess there's stress and different pressure there versus going into an institution where you're looking after people and helping people. And I have a dementia background in care as well in my past, so I've seen it myself. How did that sort of feel to you, and did that, between these two roles, did it shape you in any way?
I mean, certainly the hospital did. I was there for 10 years. My grandmother and my father died in that hospital, but the people were so good. They were so compassionate. They gave so much of themselves above and beyond, I think, what we as a family ever thought that they would do, that there was that draw. And I mean, I was not directly involved in patient care, and the patients were very happy that I wasn't, because I had no training or anything in that. But I provided a support role to those individuals. And so I learned a lot. I learned a lot about business. I learned a lot about compassion. I learned about giving more than you get in life. And I think that's incredibly important. I'll just kind of give you this perspective. I've seen so many people, and you probably have too, that feel that they're born empty, and that when they get out of school and get into life, whatever that looks like for them, that then their job is to fill up their empty self. I got to get the best education. I got to make the most money. I've got to drive the nicest car. I've got to have the latest gadgets and gizmos. And Icarus, what I found is we're not born empty. We're born full with whatever we need to be successful, however you determine what that word means in your life, already inside you. You just need to find it, pull it out, and use it for your benefit. So I think our job in life, whatever you do, should not be to fill yourself up. Your job in life should be to empty yourself out with your unique gifts and talents, certainly for the betterment of yourself, but also for the betterment of your family, of your friends, and of your community. And I think when you make that shift to, it's not what I get, it's what I give, life takes on a whole different perspective.
I totally agree. There's two bits to pick up there. So I totally agree with that. What is success? Getting my own recovery in. And I know from your journey, we're going to carry on talking about through this podcast episode. The more you give, the better you feel, because community grows. It's nice to know that people sort of like you for the fact that you didn't give them something, but you were part of something almost because of who you are and what you do. And your analogy there around being in the shadows almost within the kind of care institute, it reminds me of the NASA janitor who said, they sort of asked the question, you must have had this before, where they say, what are you doing here? And he responded, I'm putting a man on the moon. He was sort of back of house, but it's all part of the process and it's critical for care, isn't it? So that's fantastic. So my next question for you is that as that journey went on, so you've been through these different roles, you've kind of gone through a life of change, you've found things you've enjoyed and things you've learned, you've got to the point of helping, coach and save people and learn a lot about people, clearly, a lot about yourself and business and things. What was going on in the background of that, behind the scenes within Terry? What was going on as that transition to the point when things began to change?
Yeah, I mean, I've always said what's gotten me through life, certainly what's gotten me through cancer, are what I call my 3 Fs, which are faith, family, and friends. I have a very strong faith in God. I have a tremendous family. And law enforcement is one of those professions where you see things you should not see as a police officer, and you can't forget those. You will never see the kids that you had to take to the morgue that were burned up in a fire and things like that, and things that that human beings should not be exposed to. But there's a tendency, and there were a lot of my colleagues there were several of my colleagues that committed suicide. There were also several of my colleagues that became alcoholics and things like that. And I was always, hey, we're going out after the shift to get a drink. Do you want to come? We're whatever that. And my answer was, look, I love you guys. I'd lay down my life for you. But no, because I found my solace. I found my batteries getting rejuvenated by going home and being with my family. I mean, that was the most important thing to me. We have one daughter, as I mentioned, and playing with her and just being with my wife and talking. It's like, I've got to separate myself from that, from what I saw and I would tell my wife some of the things, but you need a way to decompress. And some people do that through alcohol and drugs. I did it through my faith and my family and my friends. And that's what I think kind of kept me on the straight and narrow and allowed me to see the things and do the things that I had to do in that job, but also to put that aside and say, I am not a police officer. I'm a person who is a police officer, but that's not my identity. My identity is husband and father, and that's where I got my solace, and that's where I got my batteries recharged.
As you kind of went through that journey, then so you're in this point, and then you find out, eventually through the different changes through your life that you have cancer. I mean, can you take us through that a little bit? I mean, sort of at the start of it through to when you found out kind of what kind of cancer it was, its rareness, and what that may potentially mean.
Sure. So 2012, I was a girls' high school basketball coach. I had a school security consulting business on the side, and I had a callus break open on the bottom of my left foot, right below my third toe. And initially didn't think much of it because as a coach, you're on your feet a lot. But after a few weeks of it not healing, I made an appointment and went to see a podiatrist, a foot doctor friend of mine. And he takes an x-ray and he says, Terry, I think you have a cyst in there and I can cut it out. And he does. And he shows it to me. And it's just a little gelatin sac with some white fat in it. No dark spots, no blood, nothing that gave either one of us concern. But fortunately or unfortunately, he sent it off to pathology to have it looked at. And 2 weeks later, I get the call from him. And as I mentioned, he's a friend of mine. And the more difficulty, Icarus, he's having explaining to me what's going on, the more frightened I am becoming until finally he just laid it out for me. He said, Terry, I've been a doctor for 25 years and I have never seen the form of cancer that you have. You have this incredibly rare form of melanoma. And most people think of melanoma as too much exposure to the sun. It affects the melanin, the pigment in our skin. My cancer has nothing to do with sun exposure. It's just a rare form that appears on the bottom of the feet or the palms of the hands. And because my cancer was so uncommon, he recommended I go to MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston and be treated. And I did. I had the bottom of my foot excised. I had all the lymph nodes in my groin removed. And my wife tells the story better than I do. And so I'm seeing the oncologist, and the oncologist pulls my wife out of the room and says, I need to tell him that more than likely he's going to be dead in 2 years. Do we tell him that or do we just let it go? And she said, oh no, you better tell him that because he'll be very upset if you don't, if you don't let him know. Nicholas, I had to figure out how to take a death sentence and turn it into a life sentence. And so I'm like, okay, what do we do? And she's like, Terry, we have nothing to offer you. We have surgery. If it's somewhere we can cut it out, we'll cut it out. But other than that, we have nothing. We have no trials, no treatments. We have nothing for you. And I'm like, okay, great. So you've given me this death sentence. And our daughter was in high school at the time. A time when any kid, whether you're a boy or a girl, you need your parents, you need guidance. Your body's changing, your mind's changing, everything's changing at that point in your life. And I know I went through all the stages of grief. First there was denial. I can't possibly have cancer. I've done everything right in my life. I eat right. I'm an athlete. I've exercised. I don't abuse alcohol and drugs. I did everything right. And then I got mad. There was anger. I can't possibly have cancer. I've done everything right in my life. And then there was a bargaining with God. It's like, look, God, could you please let me live long enough to see her graduate from high school? And then I absolutely got down. I got depressed. I felt sorry for myself. But then I just came out the other end and it was like, this sucks, but I'm going to have to embrace the suck. I don't like the cards that I've been dealt. I wish I could gather them all together, reshuffle them and deal them again, but I'm going to have to play the cards that I've been dealt. And that's what I've been trying to do now for the last 14 years.
And in those, as you went through that journey, so in these different phases again, through the kind of almost the grief process in a way, to where you then went, no, 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 yeah, what do I do now? What did like the first month when you said, okay, no, no, I'm not going to accept it. I'm going to just try and live forward now. What did that look like? What was Terry thinking and doing then through that process?
Well, Terry was doing a lot of praying, I can tell you that.
Yeah,
But I was also planning. I was also looking for something out there to look forward to. And of course, I've seen this. I've seen patients over these 14 years where doctors have said, hey, you're going to be dead in 2 years. And literally on the date of that 2-year anniversary, they die. And I'm like, no, no. I mean, if I die, I have no control of when I die, when my expiration date is, but I want to have something to look forward to. And I think that's incredibly important, to have something to look for. I wanted to see my daughter graduate from high school. I wanted to see her graduate from college. I wanted to walk her down the aisle on her wedding day. I wanted those things in my life, and I wanted them bad. I just didn't, oh, that'd be nice. No, I want to do these things. And I think if you have something to look forward to, something that you want to happen. I mean, cancer, disease in and of itself, it tends to isolate you. I think initially from your friends, then from your family, and if it goes on long enough, from yourself, from who you really are, from what's important in your life. So I think having a focus on something that's out there, that's in the future, that a doctor's telling me you're probably not going to see that, it's like, no, 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 no. No, I think I mentioned to you, in an email that I had 4 knee surgeries in my life. 3 were in high school, 1 was in college, and I had to fight back from those to play basketball again and things like that. So I knew how to do that. But for me, it was, I gotta plan for something that's down the road. Don't get me wrong. I think we all, have a breaking point, but I think that breaking point is so much farther down the road. We quit, we give in, we give up, because our minds say, hey, this hurts, stop it. And we
yeah,
do.
yeah.
You don't need to stop. You can keep moving forward.
Yeah, they say mind over matter, don't they? But it's not really the right term for it. I think having that, you see it in dementia patients, so people who get it, the more they keep active, they have a plan for tomorrow, they're going to keep busy. Ironically, the disease seems to progress slower. So, and you see people like myself with heart issues, I was told, look, be careful. And I was like, okay, but there's ways I can be careful, because if I'm going to not only do 200 steps and drop dead in the house, I'd rather do it down a lovely picturesque lane in the wind. So, but I think I don't think we necessarily teach people, not everybody knows how to put a true pin in. I think there's a concept of, I'm going to do this next week, I'm going to make it there. But I don't think everyone truly understands the commitment to do that. There's saying and there's doing, isn't there? So there's fighting, and then there's I'd like to. So it sounds like you were in the fight mode. I'm going to go and do this.
There is. And I remember, I don't know if you remember seeing the movie Lone Survivor. It's about 4 Navy SEALs who 3 of them end up dying, but Marcus Luttrell survives, and his back is broken and he's been shot. He's got all these things going on. And I remember listening to him talk about how he said, I would take a stick and I would move it out arm's length and I would draw a line. And he's like, if I can get to that line, then I'll draw another line, and I'll just keep moving forward. I'll just keep crawling. And I was never, that bad. I was never shot up and messed up that bad. But he ended up going miles just in that way. I'll draw a line. Can I make it to that line? Okay, I made it to that line. I'm going to draw another line. I'm going to keep going. It's a simple technique, but like you say, it's a very powerful technique to have something to look forward to. I've got to look forward to that line. I just got to get to that line. Well, for me, I had important, not that he didn't have important things, but it was more than a line. It was a graduation. It was a wedding. It was something tangible that I could look forward to. And we can all do that. Like you say, we can all look forward to something in life, and hopefully we all have something to look forward to.
Yeah. So I find this a really interesting conversation. So with me, with my heart, it was my son and daughter putting their hand in my hand. They said, don't die. And I said, okay, I won't. And then that was my driving force to stop drinking. I hear a similar thing here with your daughter. You've got milestones for her. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that because you're going to be there. And it's powerful, isn't it? That it seems to work. Well, if you've got people who are on a journey with the first, or they've just got that news of cancer, or they're in that kind of the first stages of treatment or something, if you could give some advice, right? So, and again, advice is advice. Everyone can do with it what they want. But if you were going to give some advice and say, right, listen, I recommend that if you're in that "oh shit" moment, think about this. What would that advice be?
First of all, you get hit with this, and it was interesting because a nurse told me that I was going to have surgery. And then a physician's assistant came in and told me I was going to have surgery. And then the doctor came in and told me I was going to have surgery. So they kind of, they sort of prep you by, we're going to tell you 3 times. I think the first thing I would say would be breathe, relax, take a minute. You don't have to make a decision right then and there for most people. Most cancers are, look, you can let me know in a week or 2 or whatever that. So I would, first of all, say, just try to take a breath, try to relax. You've been given this horrible news. You may be dying. That's fine. We're all going to die. Not all of us are really going to live. And the second thing I would say would pool your resources. Who are the people you trust? Who's your inner circle? Is your family, your friends? Bring them together. It's like, look, this is the news I've gotten. Here are my thoughts. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. And some people will be very emotional. They'll cry and things like that. Other people will be very rational and tell you, here's what I think you should, you should have the surgery. You should do whatever. But understand, you don't have to make the decision right then and there. Doctors may like you to make that decision right then. But I've always said to my doctors, look, if you can explain to me what you want me to do, not in medicalese, because I'm dumb. I am not that smart. You need to explain to me, kind of as a dumb guy, what you want to do and what you expect to get out of it. I'll probably do it. But if you come in at me with all this medical garbage, I'd be like, no, I'm not doing that. I don't understand it. I've got to be able to understand what you want and what you are expecting to get out of it. If I can understand that, I'll probably go along with you. And so it's a matter of, I think, a partnership. It needs to be a partnership. But Icarus, I've seen so many people that have turned their entire lives over to somebody with, their name and a bunch of initials after their name, just turn their life over to those people. That's not me. I want this to be a collaboration. And I guess those are the 3 things I would tell you. Take a breath, gather your resources, and make this a partnership with your provider, whoever he or she is.
Well, I think that collaboration, but understanding, which is everyone's right, if someone's going to do things to you for your wellness, I mean, that's critical, isn't it? Like you say, and being able to ask that question, have it answered, you deserve that. But I think collaboration too, I'm just thinking back to your point around that I'm going to be there for this. When you give your life to somebody else, you're wanting them to fix you. That almost gives away your ability to live, doesn't it, I guess, because you're now in the hands of somebody, so they're fixing me. And that's not your mind committing with your body to pair up and have another collaboration to try and have longevity, no matter what the situation is. So that's really, again, I hope anyone listening to this is going through that takes those things on, breathe, all these bits and understand it, collaborate with yourself and with them and drive forward for the best outcome that can come to the situation of which you are given. You can't change that. You can only work forward. So from there, take us through. So you've had kind of some treatments and things like this. Take us through. So since that, you were given a short period. I think you were saying you 14 years now. 14 years past that date.
14 years last month.
Well, firstly, congratulations from the world, right? Because
thank you.
You're doing a powerful thing with your time that you're every day. It sounds like, with the books and things you created. I really want to get onto those in a moment. Helping people is an amazing thing to do. And the fact you've been given a gift not just to continue, but to continue and influence is great for the world. So thank you for all of your efforts you're doing. Every day is a blessing to have another person around who's trying to help. But the other thing was, I guess, as you've gone through this, has it been a fairly consistent thing over the past 14 years? Did you get past that kind of 2-year anniversary? And was there anxiety? Do you tend to go forward now? And are you just almost in the hands of your faith now and your fate, and you're just driving forward? How is it?
So, like I said, when I was initially diagnosed, the doctor's like, we have nothing for you. So my doctor put me on a weekly injection of a drug called interferon, which, as my doctor said, it's not going to cure you. We're just trying to kick the can down the road to buy you as much time. And I took a weekly interferon injection, and it gave me terrible flu-like symptoms for 2 to 3 days every week. So imagine having the worst case of flu you've ever had in your life, and you're going to have that every week. And I took those weekly injections for 5 years. And I remember there was a point in time where I was like, look, I'm so sick of being sick. I just want to die. I just want this to be over. I prayed like, look, God, just take me. Let my wife and daughter get on with their lives, but I'm contributing nothing. I lost 50 pounds. I couldn't taste food. It was terrible. And eventually the interferon became so toxic to my body that I ended up in the intensive care unit with a body temperature of 108 degrees, which, if you know anything about body temperature, that's usually not compatible with being alive. You're usually dead if your body temperature gets that high. But again, somehow I survived that. And then there was a small period where I was on an immunotherapy that did nothing to the cancer, didn't work at all. And so they amputated my foot in 2018. Cancer worked its way up my leg. 2019, two more surgeries. And then in 2020, an undiagnosed tumor kind of in the bottom of my leg grew large enough that it broke my leg. It fractured my tibia. And my only recourse, and this was in the middle of the COVID pandemic, was to have my leg amputated above the knee. And I also found out I had these large tumors in my lungs. And I thought, this is it. And so my orthopedic surgeon had to get special permission to do the surgery. My wife dropped me off at the hospital. I could have nobody with me because of COVID. They're like, you'll be in the hospital for 10 days to 2 weeks to learn how to function without a leg. Icarus, they sent me home after 48 hours. 48 hours after cutting my leg off, they're like, go home because of COVID. We weren't prepared for that. The house wasn't prepared for me to come home in a wheelchair to use a walker or anything like that. But you figure it out. You get to a point where, yeah, I don't know, but I'm going to figure it out. I'm not just going to be like, well, there's nothing I can do. I'm probably going to die. Yeah, I am probably going to die. But you know what? We're going to figure it out. And my wife and I figured it out together. We got rid of things in the house that were trip hazards and things like that. And we figured it out. And so then I go on a clinical trial. I got these tumors in my lungs, and I told my doctor, I'm like, I'm not doing chemo. I'm not doing it. And so they were preparing me for palliative care, kind of end of life care. We're just going to keep you comfortable. And my doctor, and he was a very stoic man. He came to me and said, Terry, give me a chance. He said, I think I can help you. Give me a chance and do chemo. I said, okay, I'll give you a chance. And I did chemo, and I was only for a very short period of time. And then I got on a clinical trial drug that did nothing to the cancer but unmask it. The way cancer proliferates in the body is it hides itself from your immune system. And what this drug did, it wasn't a chemo. What didn't go in and destroy the cancer, it just unmasked the cancer from my own immune system. And for 4.5 years, I was on this drug in a stable condition. Still had the tumors, but it was stable. Everybody else on the trial with me died.
Wow.
So I was like the last man standing. And eventually the drug company decided it wasn't profitable to do this drug anymore. So they had to stop it. Last August, I had a tumor removed from my stump. This is a very brand new kind of therapy. It's called TIL. It's tumor infiltrating lymphocytes. Lymphocytes are the T cells, the killer cells in your body. Whatever it is, cancer, a cold, a flu, whatever, they see that, doesn't belong here. We need to go kill that. They take this tumor, they send it to a lab in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. They grow billions of your own T cells that are already programmed for your cancer. They eventually put you in the hospital, which I did last fall, 10 days of high-dose chemotherapy. They take you right to death's doorstep, and then they give you your own T cells back. And I have been very fortunate. The tumors that were in my stump and in my lungs, they're almost gone.
Wow,
and
amazing.
this is like a miracle. I mean, think about it. 14 years ago, you'll be dead in 2 years. We got nothing. 14 years later, this incredible new therapy that they're looking at for all kinds of solid tumor cancers is what I've been doing. Now, I've got some side effects from that I'm dealing with, but for the most part, that's kind of where I am. Sorry for the long-winded answer.
No, it's fascinating. So many years ago, I used to work in regulated pharmaceuticals. And I used to see lots of patient trials for things like cystic fibrosis and stuff. So my old inner ears now listening, going, I love to hear this stuff because it's fascinating. But again, that goes to almost, there's your own survival, and then indirectly there's learning and knowledge to extend that out to other people through your journey. So 2 years, if you'd have given up, there's data somewhere that is now also going to help somebody else. So that's amazing. Again, beyond your own story, it's the page you don't see, isn't it? What gets handed off as a note somewhere of a success. So that's amazing. So I know you've written some books now. So you've been going through all of this, and you've created books and things. So can you tell me about those?
Sure. So, first book I wrote was called Sustainable Excellence 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life. Icarus, if you would have told me I would have ever written a book in my life, I would have told you were nuts. But there was sort of this series of events. I mentioned I've been a girls' basketball coach when I first was diagnosed. One of my players who I'd coached had moved to the area in Colorado where my wife and I live now with her fiance. And the four of us had dinner one night. And I remember saying to her after dinner, I said, I'm really excited that you're living close now and I can watch you find and live your purpose. And Icarus, she got real quiet for a while. And then she looked at me and she said, well, Coach, what do you think my purpose is? I said, I have absolutely no idea what your purpose is, but that's what your life should be about. Finding the reason you were put on the face of this earth. And there is a reason, using your unique gifts and talents and living that reason. And that was the first conversation that kind of led to the book. And then I had a young man in college who reached out to me and said, what do you think are the most important things that I should learn, not to just be successful in my job or in business, but to be successful in life? And I didn't want to give him the sort of the cliches that we all, get up early, work hard, help. I didn't want to give him those cliches. So I spent some time taking notes and thinking about it, and eventually kind of had these 10 thoughts, these 10 ideas, these 10 principles. And so I sent them to him. And then I stepped back and I was like, well, I have a life story that fits underneath this principle, or I know somebody whose life emulates that principle. So literally during the 4 to 5 month period where I was healing after I had my leg amputated, I sat down at the computer every day and I built stories, and they're real stories about real people underneath each of the principles. And that's how sustainable excellence came to be. But as soon as I released it, I knew there was a second book, because sustainable excellence is about success. Success is what we do for us. And there was another word that began with S that I knew I wanted to write about, and that was significance. And significance is what we do for other people. So it's around Thanksgiving time here in the United States, 2023, started on the second book, which is Four Truths and a Lie. And there was a lot more research, a lot more things that went into that book, but I released that in September of last year. So now I feel, I've got a book about success and I've got a book about significance. And I honestly, Icarus, and this is going to sound kind of weird, I think they were something that God wanted me to do. There's sort of the old story about Jonah, Jonah and the whale. God's like, hey, Jonah, I want you to do this, so go east. And Jonah's like, oh, heck no, I don't want to do that. I'm going west. I'm getting the heck out of Dodge, And, and that's the great thing about God. He's not going to force you to do anything, but hey, I'd like you to do this. And I just felt that this was bigger than me. And I felt that through this cancer journey. This whole journey has been bigger than me. When I die, where I die, how I die, way above my pay grade. I don't worry about the dying. I spend more time worrying about how I can make a positive impact in the world.
Yeah, well, it's amazing. And where are all these books? If people listening want to, go out and get a copy to read them, where can they find them?
You can get them anywhere you get a book online. Probably the easiest place to get them would be Amazon. Just search for the titles and they'll pop up.
And your 4 principles, would you share those from that at a high level, what they are?
Sure. So I came up with these 4 truths, and it's kind of funny how I came up with these. I was on a podcast that was called My 3 Truths. And I'm like, well, I better have truths when I go on the podcast and talk about them. So I, again, spend some time codifying what you believe, what is truthful. You hear so much today about, people are triggered. They don't, that's something that goes against. And I always tell high school and college kids, it's like high school and college should be a time where you're physically safe, where, nobody's going to hurt you, but that your ideas, your values, your morals, your view of the world should be challenged. And you should be able, if you believe this, you should be able to see the other side of this. And people don't like that. It's like, well, this is what I believe, and I don't want anybody intruding on it. No, that's important in life. I think that's what high school and college should teach you. And that's what their responsibility is. I came up with these 3 truths. And then the more I thought about it, I thought there's a fourth. There's a fourth. So I'll give them to you. I have them on a Post-it note here. They're 1 sentence each. The first one is control your mind, or your mind is going to control you. The second one is embrace the pain and the difficulty that we all experience in life. Use that pain and difficulty to make you a stronger and more resilient individual. The third one, and this is the one that I added, is kind of a legacy truth. And it's what you leave behind is what you weave in the hearts of other people. And then the fourth one I think is pretty self-explanatory. As long as you don't quit, you can never be defeated. And I call these four truths kind of the bedrock of my soul. I think they're just a good place to start to build a quality life from.
And and I resonate a lot personally for those, because I've made principles myself, which were part of my recovery, and part of the journey which we all go on is, as I said at the start before we started recording, was we touch our sons, our problems, whatever it may be, we crash down, and that foundation then is the point when these principles have to kind of kick in, all these truths where you go, okay, what's going to drive me forward? So there's the who, as you say, those people around you, there's the what, but there's the mind, there's the commitment, and then there's the reason. So that's really good. And it leads perfectly into my final question. I couldn't have asked it. It isn't a setup, everyone listening. I didn't plan him to ask
Good
that question,
segue.
but it leads great. Which is, so with myself going by the name Vicarus, I picture that we all have wings to start with, right? But we kind of break them. We burn them out getting too close to the sun, and we fall down in tatters. But I always say that there's a lot of lessons in our journey, which I think then links back to one of your truths there, which is you learn a load of stuff. So now what are we going to do with it? Are we going to be a victim to it? Are we going to stay down on that floor? Are we going to go back to the problems? Or are we going to learn forward? Let our feathers, I always use the lesson that you learn being fire. You're full of flames, you're a phoenix, it's round 2, and you're going to do something different. So what I like to ask people is, if you were going to pluck a feather from yourself, right? So you've got one of these burning feathers on your back, you're going to pull it out, and it's knowledge, it's wisdom, it's a truth, it's something that you could just pass to the right. You could even let it go into the wind, but it's going to get to somebody, and it's got something written on it, which is the one thing you would like them to read. What would it say?
That's a great question. I guess it would be this. I love to read. I spend most of my free time reading. When I was in high school, I read a book called Farewell to Arms, written by Ernest Hemingway, which is a fiction book, but it's a sort of a semi-autobiographical account of Hemingway's time as an ambulance driver for the Italian army during World War I. And there's a line in it. And I love this line. I think about it almost every day. And the line is this: life breaks everyone, and afterward, many are stronger at the broken places. So just like if you were to break your arm and you'd go to the hospital, doctor would set it, put it in a cast, and it would heal. When it healed, the area of the break would be stronger than the rest of the bone. That's a metaphor for life. Life is going to beat you to your knees. It's absolutely going to beat you to your knees at some point in time. But if you keep moving forward, if you handle that adversity, and I'll give you a tip for handling that here in a minute, you will come out the other end stronger. You will come out being able to handle life better. Life never gets easier. You just learn how to handle hard things better. And so what I would recommend to your audience, sort of going a little bit more than you asked, and I do this every day of my life. Every day of your life, do one thing that scares you, that makes you nervous, that makes you uncomfortable, that's potentially embarrassing. It doesn't have to be a big thing, but if you do those small things every day, when the big disasters in life hit us, and they hit all of us, we lose somebody who's close to us, we unexpectedly get let go from our job, we find out, like Icarus and I, you have a chronic or a terminal illness, you will be so much more resilient to handle those things than people who never challenge themselves. So don't be afraid of challenges, embrace them, and see where they take you.
People don't necessarily get taught to live by the things that they're given. Yeah, we get told, educated at school to live certain ways. We try and achieve certain things. We don't necessarily back ourselves, but that's a nugget that I recommend that anyone listening takes with them if that feather comes in, because you need to live the one life that you have as well as you can. And if everybody took that advice and everyone failed every now and then, and we all saw each other doing it, but we didn't poke fun, we accepted that actually failure is part of growth, and we're just trying our best, I think life would be better because people would talk more. So Terry, listen, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I'm inspired myself by your journey, because anybody who doesn't give up is someone I think that everybody should look to ask, what can I take away from it? And I think the fact now that your journey is being shared, you're putting these things into books, and you're not doing it in a way that seems, it's not just your story, which you can see from some people. This is, life truths that people may have not learned yet that you're sharing. So that's powerful and impactful. So again, on behalf of the world, thank you for doing so, because I always look back to my own journey and go, I wish there was a book I could have just picked up before things happened, so that when they happened, I was ready. So it sounds like you have that. So I am going to go and order a copy myself now, because I'm intrigued. Thank you for telling me about it.
Thank you.
To anyone that's listening, please go and check out Terry under Terry Tucker.
Sure, it's motivationalcheck.com.
Cool. Go and look at that. There's lots of information about Terry. Terry's on LinkedIn. And are you on any other platforms, Terry? Social media platforms as well?
I'm LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube. What else am I?
He's everywhere.
LinkedIn is where I spend most of my time.
Fabulous. To anyone listening, if you are going through a hard time, if you hit something that may turn into a diagnosis, please rewind this back and listen again to the advice and the journey that Terry's been on, because I think there's a piece that I've taken away on reflection to myself when I was having heart issues, which was when you hear the either uncertainty from a doctor, when you're not quite sure and fear builds, we tell ourselves stories. And then when you hear potentially diagnosis and prognosis to this is going to happen, this is next, make sure you remember those three things that Terry said around, kind of collaboration, understanding, and picking a date for the future. Do not give up, because every single person on this planet is worthwhile saving. Every single person on this planet has a destiny of a thing they either need to learn, to do, to see, to witness, whatever it may be. But every step you take on your journey, even when it's uncertain, is learning, and you are making an impact in somebody's life by being here every single day. So do not give up. My name is Icarus. Terry, would you like to say goodbye to the world?
Yeah, everybody who's listening to us, thank you for doing this. Listen to Icarus, pass it on to your friends and family. That's the way he grows his podcasts and things like that. It's a great show. I've enjoyed this very much, Icarus. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you, Terry. Everyone, my name is Icarus, and always stay beautiful and have a wonderful day. Icarus out.